finished all our touring for that record literally days before the world shut down. Like we were on an Australia New Zealand tour, and we got back like something like March 8th or March 9th. It was like 2 or 3 days. I remember getting back and thinking, like, I thought my son was going to go back to school. But yeah, little did we know.
I had a work thing like, yeah, I think March like 4th or 5th. So I had to fly across the country and flew back. And it was early enough that we were kind of teetering because we were putting on a big convention, had a bunch of people in the room. And at that point, we were like, yeah, if we get enough hand sanitizer stations, this should be fine.
Yeah.
Just no expectations at that point. It's wild how quickly things just turned into what they did.
It's true.
That's, I guess, fortuitous timing on your end as far as anything around that could be fortuitous. Like everybody else was sort of canceling or making some really, really difficult decisions that ultimately it sounds like you didn't have to make.
Yeah, we were lucky that way. Yeah, a lot of people were just taking a loss, and like, oh, I guess we're down 10 grand on this tour because when you have to cancel a tour 2/3 of the way through, like you lose more than 1/3 of your money. Like that kind of decimates everything, because you have all the same expenses you had before, but all of a sudden, like that income's not coming in anymore.
As somebody who is a touring musician and who makes music professionally, I mean, it couldn't have been an easy time.
No, I feel like we got off. We were pretty lucky. Various things helped, like the checks. The checks from the government helped a little bit. Or like my wife, could go on unemployment. And I have some passive income just from, songwriting, so there's always publishing checks coming in every few months. So it wasn't that rough on us as it was on other people. I don't remember. I mean, it wasn't a great time, but I don't remember thinking this is going to crush us. Like we're in a bad place. So I felt pretty lucky. It was just lean. Times were just slightly lean.
That's sort of the thing about it too, is that it kept getting, the goalposts kept moving. I mean, I remember, looking back at 2020 and thinking, oh, this is going to be a couple weeks, or, oh, this is going to be a couple months, or this is going to be, and obviously like it is kind of still ongoing now, but you were able to sort of still make it work and continue to produce music the way that you have in normal times.
Yeah, because we've always been a long distance band. We've always been the band that's like, sending tracks around, and everybody, almost everybody in the band has either a full studio at their house or a decent studio setup, or at least some way to do some DIY recording. So yeah, that part made it easier. And like just whenever we were near, like our drummer was visiting family. He was visiting family in New Hampshire. So I remember this was sometime in 2020. I remember saying, just come and record for 2 days. Let's do drums. I don't know what we're going to do, but let's just drum. Let's just drum on the songs I'm working on. I don't even know if it's Pornographers music, but let's just do a bunch of drumming. And we've done that, and we still do it. Like whenever we have a day off on tour, like let's go into a tour. Let's go into a studio and record for a day or two, because it's worth doing it. We're together. So let's do some work. But just being at home, I mean, I'm lucky that that's where I am. I'm in my studio space. I have like a separate studio space that I can go to that's separate from my house. So it was great to have a place I could just go to and work. Like I didn't have to stop. Like I didn't need to, I wasn't depending on anyone else. I didn't need to go into a studio to work on music. So I felt very grateful for that. It it was very therapeutic. It was nice to have some place to go and just be creative. Like at times I thought it didn't even matter that I was finishing anything. I just wanted to work on music. I just wanted to like fiddle around on songs because yeah, it's a good thing. Trying to be creative, it's good for the brain. It's good to have your brain moving. I think that's why a lot of people started making bread. Now, thankfully I didn't have to make bread in the pandemic, because like I didn't have to stop doing what I was doing. I could still write, I could still record. So I didn't feel drawn to baking.
If you're making bread, you're making something, right? That
Yeah,
you're like actually producing something that you have like a tangible result of where your time was going that you don't get if
yeah,
you're sitting and watching Netflix all day.
yeah, exactly. I think it was and it's just as legitimate. I think somebody making bread is just as legitimate as me just toiling around on some song that maybe no one will ever hear. It's something you do to feel productive. It's like a self-soothing therapy.
It's nice to make something without the constraints and pressures of feeling like you like ultimately somebody has to listen to this.
Yeah. It yeah, it is. That's how I feel these days. I mean, I feel some obviously there's the pressure of like, yeah, you got to keep making money, making music, but I also feel like, well, all I can do is just sit here and do my best. They like I don't know some smarter, more contrived way where I could make a lot more money. I feel like all my successes come from me just writing music and working on it and trying to make it good. So I think, okay, I'm going to stick with that.
Obviously, you can write a hook with the best of them. Is that in terms of that route? Is that something that you ever explored, like being one of the 20 names that appear on a pop song?
Well, you can't, that is a hard world to break into, you know? I remember talking to my publisher years ago and saying, like, how do you write for people? Because I said, yeah, why wouldn't I want to do that? Well, why wouldn't you want to make $1 million writing a song for?
And like hear your song on the radio like
Yeah,
everywhere.
but the thing is, everybody wants to do that. And there aren't, only so many people do get to do it. And the person said to me, you basically have to find your person. Like, so it's like, so I basically have to create my own pop star, or like I either have to meet a current pop star and convince them that, they should record my song, or I basically have to make my own. And I thought, okay, well, it's good to know. Just shoot all my delusions down immediately so I don't waste any more time doing it. But I mean, people have said that to me for years. It's like, why don't you do this? It's like, you don't think I'm trying? What it's like why don't I do soundtrack scores? Because somebody has to ask you to do it.
That's fair.
And I have done a couple of those. But yeah, there's you and there's and I see a lot of people like that are kind of peers of mine through the years. I used to peer name, the word peers loosely, but
Contemporaries.
yeah, contemporaries. And you see them exploding, and doing that stuff you dreamed of, like looking at like Aaron Dessner or like Tobias Jesso Jr., who have basically just moved into the mainstream stratosphere of being like a songwriter, producer. And yeah, some people get to do that, and and it's cool. It's not a I don't resent them. It's not like if they weren't there, I would have been there to step in and take their spot. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to write for people. But like most musicians, I got to write for myself. Until somebody says, "Hey, I want to record your song."
That's a healthy place to be mentally. I know for me in my own life, it's taken a while for me to get there, to not feel to not resent people for their successes. Like, especially when you're younger and just starting out, it's really difficult not to compare yourself to your peers or your contemporaries.
It's true. And there's always a level of that. Just being human, I think there's always like some minimum base level of like jealousy. Like, oh yeah, it must be nice to have a $10 million and live in the Hollywood Hills or whatever. Just be set for life. But I also have to step back and remind myself that I've had it pretty good. A lot of people don't get to have their little career in music, and I got that, and I have my house here and I built my little studio where I can work. And it's something I really kind of dreamt of and worked towards through the years. So I feel pretty lucky. And I try, you just try and remind yourself that, be happy with your place. That long poem, Desiderata? It's a poem somebody wrote like 100 years ago, but it's a great, it's one of those things you read just to remind yourself. Like it's one of those things like, be at peace, do not be vain. Like, do not take pride in your work. Do not be jealous of others. It's like this long screed that you can just read over the course of 3 or 4 minutes and remind yourself, like, yes, the universe is at peace. Try to be at peace as well. So yeah, I try to be zen about things. Just be. I feel like I've had it pretty good. I talk to other people. Or it's not. You don't have to go very far to see how people are struggling in this world. And I don't have to show up at a job I hate, and that's like 80% of I feel like 80% of the population just gets up and goes to a job that they hate, and they go to that job they hate just to get by, not save money, just to like get the bills paid that month. And that's like a massive section of the population. So like when I put it all in perspective, it's like, yeah, who cares that I'm not writing and producing Taylor Swift records? Yeah. I've had it nice.
I was talking to somebody from Europe about this, and it seems profoundly American, maybe Canadian as well. I'm not sure, but the thing that we do when you're introduced to somebody new, first thing is your name. Second thing, invariably, is what you do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a foundational, definitional thing to us, and like that, it kind of sucks generally for most people. But that really sucks if you don't like what you're doing, and it's kind of, in a sense, the thing that defines you.
Yeah, that is shitty. It's even weird. Like when before the Pornographers started getting popular, there was a feeling of like being embarrassed to say I was a musician, because saying I was a musician just felt like saying I'm unemployed. And even when I started making my living from music, I remember telling people I'm a musician, and people would occasionally say, yeah, but what do you do for a living? And I'd say, no, that's what I do. My job is I make enough money to live off of my music. But yeah, there's definitely a very much zero to hero thing with musicians. Like you feel like a loser, but then all of a sudden everybody's super impressed by you. All of a sudden it's like, wow. And it's like, well, you should have reacted like that from the beginning. You should be interested in every musician that you meet, because it's a legitimate job. It's an interesting job.
You come from a place that obviously nowhere is perfect, but does a better job at supporting artists than here. I mean, you mentioned the stimulus checks, and that's like, literally the least that could possibly be done to help people not starve.
Yeah, it was so rare, and of course billionaires had to line their pockets with 90% of it, and then the dribs got sent out to the rest of the population. Yeah, I think it was good living in Canada. Like I think about it because in the New York Times there was an article about the artists. Did you see that? 2,000 artists in Ireland were given basically basic income for a year. They were given like $1,500 a month. And it was an article about that, and the artist saying how this made a big difference to me. And I think in Canada we didn't have that, but I felt like it was easier to get by being poor. I think I essentially spent the entirety of my 20s just being poor, being a poor musician, but I could survive. I didn't have much rent. You know, and I feel like it would have made such a big difference if somebody had said, here's $1,200 a month, like, or even 1,000. Here's 1,000, $1,200 a month, and I would have thought, like, okay, yeah, I'm not rich, but I can pay my rent, and I can live. I can not scrape to survive, and and I think what a wonderful what a wonderful world, and that would be, and a lot of Europe is like that. The Scandinavian countries, you can be on unemployment, and yeah, you can afford, you can be married and have kids and be a noise musician, and yeah, you can get by, you can survive, and I think that's how it should be. Some people are content to live like that and not have much, but most people are going to strive for more. Most people are not going to say, I want to live off $1,000 a month for the rest of my life. This is the life. They're going to try and move on to something different. But we're in America where there's just a general feeling that you must suffer. Like you must suffer just to survive. The idea of like giving everybody enough to survive, it just seems alien. And it's like, why shouldn't everybody have enough to survive? Just enough to survive. Nothing special. But that's kind of a tangent. But
we do romanticize the struggle in our 20s, right? I mean, there is something when you're still young, you can still kind of, you can work, like, get a restaurant job or, work retail, and then like still have the energy to go home and write and perform.
Mm-hmm.
But something that's romantic in your 20s, like it sure doesn't stay romantic when you get to your 30s or 40s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there is, like, I find myself touring, and like, there's some part of touring that sucks, but there's some part of touring that I still kind of enjoy, that I'm kind of glad, that I still get to do it, even though I'm kind of too old for it at this point. But I love that, like, I'm an adult man, and I get to go out and hang out with my friends, and play music. Like I'm glad I get to do something that people think of as such a childish thing to do. But yeah, it's my job.
Again, this is sort of the modern condition, but most people after a certain point in life, like, don't really have a lot of close friends, and you're able to maintain that through this, which is nice.
Yeah. It reaches you out into a bigger community, which I love. I think that's why people get sucked into religion or even cults, because they want to be a part of a community.
It is funny how many like cult leaders are failed musicians.
Yeah. I mean, you see how people, need that community, and musicians have that, and so, instead of like a church group, I can travel around and I can meet other musicians, or people who come to the shows who love music, or people who work in venues or promoters, or just everybody who works in that world. Yeah, so that is, I've always appreciated that. I think that's what I always loved about music, when I realized it could be a community.
What does it mean to be too old to tour?
I don't. I don't. I don't know. I mean, what do you mean? What do I mean when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, you were obviously saying it like, somewhat jokingly, because you're still doing it, and there probably will be a point in your life when you are like physically too old to tour.
Well, I think, well, it's like you were talking about. You're in your 20s, maybe you tour around in a van, and you're like, this is cool, and you're sleeping on people's floors. But then I don't do that anymore, and I wouldn't want to go back to that. And so I'm at the next level where, I'm touring in a bus, but it's still kind of grinding, like you're still kind of cutting corners in some places. It's like and and you're still, there's a lot of work. Maybe you're going to a radio session, and like you haven't crossed into total rock star world yet, you know. I think the point when it's okay to be an older person touring is when you're like, yeah, I'm a total rock star. I have my own bus. I tour in complete. I tour in complete comfort and style. And then it feels like, sure, be an old person touring. But so I'm still in that. I'm still in that kind of. Although I've done very well, I'm still in that kind of scrappy place. I'm not. I'm flying coach. I'm not flying in first class. We're still trying to look for the cheaper flights. We're still trying to cut costs so we make more money on the tour and that kind of stuff. But it's the life I chose, and why not? It's and also why should I be a rock star? It's not like the world owes it to me. I'm lucky. I just feel lucky to have my place again.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that like as I've gotten older that has been useful to, I guess, come to grips with is realizing that like, hey, maybe there's a ceiling to what I do. Maybe, you know what I mean? Like maybe it's just something I can't parlay into being, a superstar.
Yeah, like I was thinking about that. It's like somebody at a job, like you might work at a corporation. Maybe you've worked there for 20 years. Maybe you've worked there for 30 years. And at some point you have to reconcile the fact that, yeah, I'm not going to be the CEO. you know, I'm not going to be running the Western US division. I'm going to be the manager here in my department. And I think when you and I realized that, like, yeah, like I'm not going to for me to break through, something weird would have to happen. Like something weird that I have no control of would have to happen. So like I'm under no delusion like, oh, if I make this record really good, it'll break through and we'll have a hit and we'll get huge. It's like, no. That's not going to happen. It doesn't mean you can't make a great record that a lot of people like. But yeah, you realize you're limited. I mean, I've thought that for the longest time. I remember even when we were at our most popular, like around 2005, 2006, I remember thinking like, there's only so many things we can do, because, and it had to do with the kind of band we were, like we couldn't spend 6 months touring the world. We didn't have, sometimes we couldn't get Nico to play with us. Sometimes we couldn't get Dan to play with us. We just weren't a band that we like, I just knew like I had to accept it back then. Like I've got a good thing here, but it has a kind of ceiling on it, like an obvious ceiling. And I'm just going to try and, do my best. Like even knowing there is this obvious ceiling. Yeah. And you see so many bands pass you. You see bands, just like started out small and it was like, hey, nice to meet you, Vampire Weekend and Fleet Foxes. You're an obscure new band. 6 months later, oh, you're on SNL. And which is not to say that with any kind of bitterness. It's like you just kind of get used to the fact that, like, yeah, some bands are just going to zoom past you and become stars, and there are amazing bands that will never get a break. Bands you love will, have to get day jobs because they can't break through for some reason. And yeah, it's just part of it's like a bingo game. Part of it's a crapshoot.
You've had the AC Newman stuff and you've had solo stuff, but this is the new Pornographers are really like specifically your main focus, would you say?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I haven't made a solo record in 10 years, and I'm not planning on it, because at some point I thought, like, why? like I have a bigger platform here.
Sure.
And it's not that different. It's not like I want a place for my techno music or I want a place for my neoclassical music. My solo records I was making music was not that far removed from the Pornographers. So I thought, why don't I just Why don't I just do this?
Was it frustrating in those early days, and is there a sense in which it continues to be frustrating in that, like, I mean, I don't think Dan is technically in the band anymore, but
No.
that this is kind of everybody's, or this is a bunch of people's side projects, but this is your main thing.
Yeah, I was just talking about that with somebody. Yeah, it's almost everybody else in the band is their side project, but for me, it's the main thing. But I think that's kind of what has helped with the longevity. Is that it's like nobody is jockeying for position in the band, at least not anymore. Um, and so people know it's like, yeah, I'm the person kind of guiding this thing, and and obviously I want everybody's ideas and I want everybody's input. I want it to be a group effort, but yeah, I'm the person kind of corralling it, and these days I'm like doing a lot of my own engineering and production and mixing, just kind of overseeing it a lot more than I used to. Um, yeah, and I think people know that, so it seems to work, you know.
When you say at least not anymore, was there tension early on?
Well, we do. We have dropped a couple band members through the years. It's not usually people don't when people leave bands, no matter what they say, it's usually not people dancing hand in hand into the sunset. you know,
It can still be amicable, but there can still be tension.
yeah, yeah, but and like, and sometimes when you can tell a person's just not into doing it anymore, you know, it's like a relationship falling apart. It's like we don't have to hate each other, but yeah, we should not be married anymore.
Dan specifically is interesting because he was out and then he came back for a little while. Is there kind of an open door policy for him specifically?
Oh, very, very much so. I mean, and it's always been that way, literally from the beginning. Like he moved to Spain about a month or two after Mass Romantic came out, and I remember thinking, are you fucking kidding me? Like right at the moment when it feels like something's finally happening, you're going to move to Spain. But that's just how he's always been. But then he came back from Spain and ended up being on the second record, and and then he was on every record until Brill Bruisers. Yeah, he's never been in photos. He always kind of wanted to keep his distance. It was something that he could just kind of pop in and do, and it's still like that. Like, I don't know. It's conceivable he could be on another Pornographers record. I don't know, but that door is not closed. It's not like Morrissey and Marr. It's not like we will never work together. I promise you that. It's very much like we're friends. Like I love hanging out with them when I can.
With something like that and somebody like him, I mean, he's brilliant. As long as things are still cool between the two of you, why not keep it open?
Yeah. And I think it's cool because there's always been that open door policy. I think he's always had that kind of. I've never been on his ass like going, you got to be in or out, man. You got to be focused on the band. It was always like, hey, we're happy to have you whenever you can do it. Obviously I'm going to ask you to do it, because we're friends and I'm a fan of what you do. But yeah, he's a great guy. It's like he just wrote me out of the blue a couple months ago just to tell me how much he liked the new record, and I was like, yeah, that means a huge amount coming from Dan because he's kind of my ultimate audience. Like when you're making music, you're like, yeah, you want, you know if your peers are into what you do, then you're like, okay, yeah, that makes me feel good.
I was reading or listening to something, I think an interview with you, and you had sort of described this idea of working within your means, of like, and this relates to what we've been talking about, but of like realizing what your skill sets are and then really honing those. But reading some of the kind of press material around the new record, it sounds like there was also an extent here in which you were trying to push some of those things and maybe work outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, especially in terms of like learning to record, but a lot of it was, I mean, I had time. I had so much time where I could just sit in this studio here and just throw stuff at the wall for hours. And I grew to love it. And I realized there was stuff that I was just like making and recording, and I thought we'll do a version later that sounds better. And then when it got down to it, I realized no, what I'm doing is good. Like, like not being an engineer or even understanding, I couldn't talk to you intelligently about engineering and production, but I did it, and I know what I like. I like, I mess with effects and the EQ until I find what I like, and I realize like, okay, well, I can do this. Maybe it takes me longer to get there, but yeah, I know how to do this, and that kind of opened things up for me a lot. Just to trust my instincts in a new way.
At what point in the process did you realize that was something that you could take on yourself?
I remember on the last record, we were doing some recording in Vancouver, and I'd done a lot of recording myself here. And I remember Dave Carswell, who's worked with us on a lot of records. I remember him turning around in his chair in the studio and going like, "You recorded all this yourself?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "It sounds really good." And I was like, "Thanks, man." It's like I was trying real hard. And so the fact that like a producer that I admired and respected like thought, "Yeah, this sounds good what you've done here." I felt okay. I'm getting there. That's good. I'm actually getting there.
I had Nick Lowe on the show a while ago. Like talk about like geniuses of writing perfect pop music, but and he was describing, and actually, like, funnily enough, Rick Rubin, I don't want to say got in trouble, but maybe became a character of the day on Twitter, because he was describing like his role as producer.
Oh yeah, I saw that where he's like, "I don't know how to do anything."
Like, obviously he was, downplaying, like,
yeah, kind of bullshit. Like, but I know what he means. Like, if I was describing myself, I might say something similar. Like, and I think what he was trying to say is something I would say as well. It's like, yeah, I'm not an expert. I don't know everything there is to know about every board, but I know what I like, and I know how to, I know how to get a sound. I know when I hear the sound I like, and I know when I hear a sound I don't like. And sometimes it's as easy as pushing a fader up and down, or just turning the mix on an effect. Yeah, it is not rocket science. And some of the great producers just knew how to get a good performance. They knew, like Joe Boyd, like he just moved the mics around. Like, let's move the mic here. Oh, it sounds cool. Like the band's in the room. Let's just like figure out where the mics are going to go, where it sounds good. And that is a brilliant kind of production. It is kind of simple.
What Nick said to me, what Mr. Lowe said to me, and whatever other people have said to me, is that there's also just value in being an outside voice for the bands. Like, just like, obviously, like, you've been writing and recording all this music together, and just to have somebody come in and give their sort of third party opinions is valuable.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends who the person is.
Well, sure. If it's Nick Lowe,
it's not just any opinion. Like it should be somebody whose opinion you really value. So I mean, and sometimes people come in with their opinions and they think, "Oh, I'm the outside voice, so you should listen to me. I have perspective." And it's like, yeah, but I don't respect you, so I don't care about your perspective.
Or you just don't understand what we're doing, which is probably the case all the
time. I think that is the balance sometimes, is knowing when to listen to yourself because it's your project and you know what you want, and when to listen to other people because you can get lost in your head. Sometimes you lose perspective. Sometimes you can't hear what's good. Sometimes you want to cut a good song just because your brain has just told you you're sick of it. And you need another person to go, "No, this is good." And sometimes you need another person to go, "This song you love so much, I don't really like it that much." But you can ignore that. It's my job it's their job to give their opinions, and it's my job to go, well, okay, I'm going to listen carefully and take it into account, but I don't have to listen. You know, when Nick Lowe and Rick Rubin give you suggestions, maybe you only take half of them. You know, and maybe it's that balance that makes it all work.
We've all been up in our own heads for the last 3 years, right?
Yeah.
It's unavoidable, and you know, as you said, the band's been remote basically since the beginning, but obviously the pandemic has been incredibly isolating, and you know, just the mere fact that you're doing as much as you are in your own studio at your own home, like how does it must be hard to not be like too much in your own head about the music making process.
Yeah, I think I definitely am, but I think I'm kind of aware. I think I'm aware when I get there. Like I sometimes I have to work through it. Like I feel like just try and be creative. And if you have an idea, even if it's a dumb idea, well, hopefully you'll realize, you know, spend a few hours on your dumb idea and then come back a couple of days later and listen to it with your fresh ears. And maybe you'll go, well, that was, you know, that was pointless. You know, like being like, and that's the way to get out of your head is just to like leave it for a while and come back and forget about it. Yeah, I mean, I that balance of because there's an element of craziness that I think is essential to our music. There's an element of it that is the sound of a person just kind of going off a little bit. Like I want to make kind of off decisions. Like I don't always want our music to be very clear and concise and radio friendly. Sometimes I want it to be. Sometimes the right thing for me is something slightly cacophonous, maybe something slightly muddy. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to rein the madness in. I don't really know the answer, except try to be aware. Try to be aware that it's happening. It's like the first step of, you know, becoming sober is to admit you have a problem. You know, so the first step of like getting over that is to remind yourself that yeah, you can get lost in your head. So try and stop yourself. Try and stop yourself when you feel like you're losing it a little bit. And
It's probably surprisingly easy to go the Brian Wilson route of just being kind of driven. I mean, obviously, like there were underlying things that he was dealing with, but also just like to extent being driven mad by the pursuit of making something perfect.
his case is so weird because I mean, like Pet Sounds and Good Vibrations, he was on to something just insane and revolutionary. And it almost makes you feel better about yourself that he went crazy. Yeah, it's because like, of course, like to be that good, you know, to be that good is to look into the precipice. It is to gaze into madness. And you know, and after that, you go, yeah, where would you go next? Where would you go after making Good Vibrations? Where would you go next in pop music? Uh, you know, I don't know. Like, yeah, Insanity. Insanity was the only logical place. The only logical place to go after that. I mean, not to be flippant about it, but you know, obviously, like everybody, I'm in awe of his work, and I mean, it's a fascinating study because yeah, how does somebody go from being the absolute most original, top of the game musician producer to just losing it completely? I mean, it doesn't happen to many other people.
Is there an extent to which you're sort of starting from as close as you can get to a perfect pop song in terms of like, you know, melody and hooks, and then trying to kind of mess it up or trying to make it a little weirder?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, I don't want to make like people always call us a power pop band. Like, I don't want to be a power pop band. You know, like a lot of that music sounds really boring to me. um, so like I remember songs like Sing Me Spanish Techno. It became one of our most popular songs. But I remember when we were recording it thinking, this just sounds dumb. Like I remember, like to me, it just seems so straight ahead. Sing Me Spanish Techno, dumb song. But people seem to like it.
This is my like big life lesson of recent vintage is you you can't get mad. Like when people like something that you don't think is your best thing, you've got to take that and appreciate that they just like something that you do at all.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, because it's a pop song. It was a good pop song, but to me, I thought it was too straight.